The auction's Underdog. The grand interstellar auction was in full swing. The air buzzed with excitement as buyers from across the galaxy shouted bids for rare creatures, strange artifacts, and exotic treasures. The massive hall gleamed under the lights, but amidst the glamour and wealth, a forgotten corner held the least impressive lot of the day, an old alien horse. The creature stood silently in its pen, its once shining coat now dull and patched with scars. Its mane hung limp, and its legs trembled as if the weight of its own body was too much to bear. It was hard to believe that this creature could ever have been special. Most buyers didn't even glance at it. Those who did only shook their heads and moved on. Callie, a young human girl with bright eyes and an even brighter determination, stepped into the auction hall. She was out of place here, wearing simple clothes and carrying a worn bag slung over her shoulder. She had traveled far from her struggling farm on a distant colony planet, desperate to find something, anything, that could help her family survive. The farm had been in her family for generations, but drought and debt were threatening to take it all away. She scanned the items and creatures on display, hoping for a miracle. Callie wasn't rich like the other buyers, but she had saved up every credit she could. She needed something unique, something valuable, to turn her luck around. As she wandered through the rows of glittering treasures, her gaze fell on the old alien horse. Unlike the other buyers, Callie stopped. She stared at the creature, her head tilting slightly as she studied it. It wasn't just the scars or the tired look in its eyes that caught her attention. It was the eyes themselves. They weren't lifeless like she expected. Instead, they held a depth, a strange spark, as if the creature still had a story to tell. "Move along, girl," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was the auctioneer, a portly alien with green, mottled skin. He barely spared her a glance as he waved a hand dismissively. "That one's no good. Old, broken, and useless. No one wants it." Callie ignored him and stepped closer to the pen. The alien horse didn't flinch or move away. Instead, it met her gaze. For a moment, it felt as if they were speaking without words. Callie felt something deep in her chest, a strange connection she couldn't explain. "How much is it?" she asked, her voice steady. The auctioneer turned, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "For that old thing," he chuckled. "Why waste your money? You'd get more use out of a sack of grain." "How much?" Callie repeated. The alien shrugged, clearly amused. "Starting bid is 50 credits. But honestly, girl, no one's going to bid. You'll be throwing your money away." The crowd around her began to notice. Whispers spread as more and more buyers turned to see what was happening. A few chuckles echoed through the hall. "Is she serious?" one alien muttered, its multiple eyes blinking in disbelief. "Poor thing probably doesn't know any better," another said, smirking. Callie ignored them all. She raised her hand, her heart pounding. 50 credits, she said loudly. The auctioneer blinked, startled. "Very well, 50 credits. Do I hear 60? He paused, waiting. The hall remained silent. Not a single other buyer made a bid. The alien sighed and raised his gavel. "Going once, going twice, sold." As the gavel struck, laughter erupted around her. Callie felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't care. She approached the pen, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked it. The old alien horse stepped forward, its movements slow but deliberate. Callie reached out a hand, and the creature sniffed it cautiously before nudging her palm with its nose. "You'll be all right now," she whispered to the horse. "We'll figure this out together." The auctioneer handed her the reins with a smirk. "Good luck with that," he said, shaking his head. "You'll need it." As Callie led the horse out of the hall, the laughter and mocking voices followed her. But she didn't look back. She had spent almost all her savings, but somehow she didn't regret it. The connection she felt with the creature was too strong to ignore. There was something special about this horse, something no one else could see. Outside, under the twin suns of the alien world, Callie paused and turned to the horse. "You need a name," she said softly, brushing her fingers along its scared neck. After a moment of thought, she smiled. "Zephyr, that's what I'll call you. It means a gentle wind, but I have a feeling there's a storm inside you somewhere." The alien horse snorted softly, almost as if it understood. Callie felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, this strange, overlooked creature would be the miracle she was searching for. Unbeknownst to Callie, a pair of shadowy figures watched her from the distance, their eyes narrowing as she disappeared into the horizon with her new companion. The old horse wasn't as forgotten as everyone believed, and its true potential was about to change everything. The leap of faith. Callie's small transport ship hummed softly as it soared through the starry expanse toward her home. Zephyr, the old alien horse, stood quietly in the cargo bay, its large eyes watching her every move. Despite the bruises of mockery still fresh in her mind, Callie couldn't shake the strange feeling that she had made the right choice. As the ship descended onto her dusty farm, Callie's neighbors had already gathered, drawn by curiosity about her mysterious auction purchase. The farm was no stranger to struggles. It was a tough, arid land where every inch of soil had to be coaxed into producing crops. Callie's parents had left her the farm before passing away, but debts and harsh conditions had brought her to the brink of losing everything. When she led Zephyr down the ramp, the crowd's murmurs turned into outright laughter. "That's it. That's what you wasted your credits on." Old Harvin, a gruff neighbor with a permanently sour expression, spat on the ground. "You could have bought a cargo of seed or even fixed your irrigation system. Instead, you bring back that useless bag of bones." Others joined in, their words cutting deeper than she expected. But Callie stood firm. She gently stroked Zephyr's mane, meeting the creature's eyes again. The strange depth in those eyes hadn't faded. If anything, they seemed brighter now, filled with an unspoken promise. "I didn't bring him here to impress you," Callie replied, her voice steady. "Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even if no one else does." That evening, after the crowd dispersed, Callie began tending to Zephyr with care she hadn't shown anything in years. She set up a shaded pen with fresh water and feed, knowing her supplies were limited but unwilling to let the creature suffer. As she worked, she spoke softly to Zephyr, sharing her worries and dreams. "You might be old and scared," she murmured, "but so am I, in a way. We both have something to prove." Zephyr didn't respond, of course, but it watched her with an intensity that made her pause. It was almost as if it understood. That night, as Callie lay awake under the stars, she heard a faint sound from the pen. She grabbed a flashlight and headed out, heart pounding. When she reached the pen, she froze. Zephyr stood in the middle of the enclosure, its body glowing faintly under the moonlight. The soft, bluish light seemed to radiate from within the horse, highlighting the scars on its body. But what struck Callie the most was how strong it suddenly looked. Its posture straight, its legs steady. The frail creature from the auction now looked like a shadow of something far more powerful. "What are you?" she whispered, stepping closer. Zephyr's ears twitched, but it didn't move away. Callie reached out a hand, brushing her fingers against its glowing coat. The light flickered slightly, then faded, leaving Zephyr as it was before. The glow was gone, but the connection she felt had only grown stronger. The rumors begin. The next morning, Callie couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. Was it real, or just her tired mind playing tricks on her? As she fed Zephyr and cleaned the pen, she noticed how much stronger it seemed already, as if the night had renewed it in some way. News of the strange horse spread quickly, though not in the way Callie hoped. Whispers in the village turned to ridicule. "Did you hear? Callie's alien horse glows in the dark now." Someone sneered. "They say she talks to it, too," another voice chimed in mockingly. "What's next? Is it going to start flying?" The constant mockery was hard to ignore, but Callie had no choice. She threw herself into training Zephyr, even though she wasn't entirely sure what she was preparing for. Deep down, She knew Zephyr wasn't just a work animal. It was something more. Then one evening, while brushing Zephyr's mane, Callie noticed something unusual. A series of faint markings along its neck that hadn't been visible before. The shapes were intricate, almost like a map or a code, glowing faintly when she touched them. Driven by curiosity, Callie began researching in her family's old database, piecing together fragments of alien history. What she found left her speechless. The hidden truth. Zephyr wasn't just an ordinary alien horse. It belonged to an ancient, nearly extinct species known as the Vera, creatures once revered as companions of warriors across the galaxy. These creatures were known for their intelligence and loyalty, but also for their hidden abilities that had been the key to the survival of entire civilizations. Callie's heart raced as she connected the dots. The glow, the markings, and Zephyr's strange behavior weren't coincidences. Somewhere deep within its scared body, Zephyr still carried the legacy of its powerful ancestors. But if this was true, it raised a terrifying question. Why had such a valuable creature been discarded at the auction? Unbeknownst to Callie, her discovery had not gone unnoticed. Shadowy figures from the auction had followed her to the farm, and they were watching closely. Zephyr wasn't supposed to fall into the hands of a human, and they weren't about to let its secrets be uncovered. As the sun set, Callie stood by the pen, her hand resting on Zephyr's neck. She didn't know it yet, but her leap of faith had set something into motion that would change her life, and the galaxy, forever. Uncovering Zephyr's past. Days turned into weeks as Callie worked tirelessly to nurse Zephyr back to health and strength. The alien horse no longer looked as frail as it had at the auction. Its coat gleamed faintly under the twin suns of her colony world, and its once sluggish movements had become deliberate and graceful. Yet, despite the visible improvement, Callie couldn't shake the feeling that she had only scratched the surface of Zephyr's true potential. One evening, as she cleaned Zephyr's pen, her fingers brushed against the faint markings on its neck, the strange, glowing patterns she had noticed before. This time, the markings responded with a faint hum, sending a tingle through her fingertips. Startled, she stepped back, her heart pounding. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered, staring at the horse. Zephyr tilted its head, its large, intelligent eyes meeting hers. The connection between them felt almost tangible, like an unspoken bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. Unable to ignore her curiosity, Callie decided to dig deeper. She dusted off the old database in her farmhouse, a relic from her parents' time, and began searching for anything that might explain the markings or Zephyr's glowing aura. It was slow, painstaking work, but Callie was determined. She spent long nights poring over fragmented texts, alien archives, and records of ancient species. The revelation. After countless hours, Callie stumbled upon a piece of information that made her gasp. The markings on Zephyr's neck matched the sigils of the Vera, an ancient species thought to be extinct. The Vera were not mere animals. They were legendary creatures once bonded to warriors and heroes of old. Renowned for their extraordinary abilities, the Vera were said to have been capable of telepathic communication, energy manipulation, and even limited time-space navigation. But the Vera had disappeared from history thousands of years ago. The records suggested that their extinction was linked to the fall of a powerful empire that had used them as living weapons. If Zephyr truly was one of the Vera, it was likely the last of its kind, a relic of a forgotten age. Callie's mind raced. If this was true, how had Zephyr ended up in an auction, discarded like a common farm animal? Who had allowed such a priceless creature to fall into obscurity? More importantly, what secrets might Zephyr still hold? The memory bond. Callie's questions deepened the bond between her and Zephyr. She began speaking to it, not just as a caretaker, but as a friend, sharing her thoughts and fears. To her astonishment, Zephyr began responding, not in words, but in subtle, unmistakable ways. It would nudge her when she spoke of her struggles, lower its head in understanding, or emit a faint glow when she touched its markings. Then one night, something extraordinary happened. As Callie sat by Zephyr's pen, leaning against the fence under the starlit sky, she drifted into a light sleep. She dreamed, or at least she thought she was dreaming. In her mind, she was no longer on her farm, but standing in the middle of a vast, golden battlefield. Alien warriors clad in shimmering armor charged across the horizon, their cries echoing in her ears. At the forefront of the battle were majestic creatures like Zephyr, glowing with power as they carried their riders into the fray. Callie watched in awe as the dream unfolded. The warriors were not just fighting. They were protecting something. A city of light stood in the distance, its towers reaching into the heavens. The bond between the warriors and their mounts was palpable, a partnership forged in trust and understanding. But as the dream progressed, the scene darkened. The city fell, consumed by an unknown force, and the creatures scattered, their light dimming. Callie woke with a start, her heart pounding. She looked at Zephyr, who was watching her intently, its eyes glowing faintly. The dream hadn't been random. It had been a memory. Somehow, Zephyr had shared its past with her, showing her the rise and fall of its people. The threat looms. The dream left Callie shaken but determined. Zephyr wasn't just a horse. It was a living piece of history, carrying the weight of an ancient legacy. But the memory also brought a new fear. If Zephyr's kind had been hunted and enslaved before, what would happen if someone discovered its true nature now? Unbeknownst to Callie, someone already had. The shadowy figures who had followed her from the auction were not mere spectators. They belonged to a powerful syndicate that trafficked rare and exotic creatures. To them, Zephyr wasn't a relic to be preserved. It was a prize to be exploited. The syndicate had been watching Callie's farm for weeks, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had seen the horse's glow, heard whispers of its transformation, and pieced together the truth. Now, they were ready to act. A plan of action. Callie sensed the danger before it arrived. The uneasy feeling that had been growing in her chest wouldn't let her rest. She began taking precautions, fortifying the farm, and keeping Zephyr hidden as much as possible. But she knew that secrecy wouldn't protect them forever. If the syndicate came for Zephyr, she would need more than walls and fences. She would need a plan. Determined to protect her companion, Callie decided to train Zephyr further, pushing its abilities to the limit. She knew the creature was capable of extraordinary things, but unlocking its full potential would require trust, patience, and courage. The first challenge. The sun hung low in the alien sky, casting long shadows across Callie's modest farm. Weeks had passed since she had uncovered the truth about Zephyr, and their bond had only deepened. The once frail and forgotten alien horse now carried itself with quiet strength, its coat glowing faintly under the sunlight. But Callie knew that their time of peace wouldn't last. Rumors of Zephyr's transformation had spread beyond the village, reaching the ears of adventurers, collectors, and even rival farmers. Whispers of a mysterious alien horse with otherworldly abilities had begun to draw unwanted attention. Callie felt the weight of their curiosity pressing against her, threatening the fragile sanctuary she had created for Zephyr. It was during one of her supply runs to the village that she first heard about the Intergalactic Frontier Challenge, an annual event held to showcase the fastest and strongest mounts in the galaxy. The prize was enormous. Enough credits to pay off her farm's debts and secure a future for her and Zephyr. But the challenge was no ordinary race. It was a grueling, multi-phase competition that tested not only speed but also endurance, intelligence, and the bond between rider and mount. A risky decision. Callie stood outside the village's central notice board, staring at the holographic poster announcing the challenge. The idea of entering seemed absurd. Zephyr was still regaining its strength, and they had no experience with competitive racing. The other participants would bring genetically modified mounts, battle-hardened creatures, and seasoned riders. What chance did she have against them? "Don't even think about it," said old Harvin, his gruff voice cutting through her thoughts. He leaned on his cane, his eyes narrowing at her. "That race isn't for someone like you, Callie. It's for professionals, not a broke farmer with a pet charity case. Callie's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked back at the poster and imagined the future it promised. If they could win, it would change everything, not just for her but for Zephyr too. The world would see Zephyr for what it truly was, a creature of strength, grace, and untapped potential. The decision was made. Callie signed up for the race that same day, ignoring the looks of disbelief and ridicule from the villagers. As she walked back to her farm, determination burned in her chest. She had taken risks before, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. Training for the impossible. The days that followed were filled with relentless training. Callie and Zephyr worked from dawn until dusk, pushing themselves to their limits. At first, the challenges seemed insurmountable. Zephyr struggled with stamina, its movements still hindered by old injuries. Callie, too, had to adapt, learning how to communicate with her mount in ways she had never tried before. But as the weeks passed, something extraordinary began to happen. Zephyr's hidden abilities started to emerge. It moved with a speed and agility that defied its size, gliding over obstacles as if they weren't there. Its senses were uncanny, able to anticipate dangers and navigate difficult terrain with ease. One evening, during a particularly grueling session, Callie stumbled and fell while practicing a sharp turn. As she hit the ground, Zephyr skidded to a halt, turning back to her with a look of concern. It nudged her shoulder gently, its glowing eyes filled with something that almost felt like encouragement. "We're going to figure this out," Callie whispered, brushing dirt from her hands. "I promise." That night, under the light of the twin moons, Callie sat by the fence, watching Zephyr graze. She couldn't help but feel that their bond was something more than human and animal. It was as if they were connected on a deeper level, their shared struggles weaving an unbreakable thread between them. The race looms. As the day of the challenge approached, Callie felt the pressure mounting. The villagers continued to mock her, calling her efforts futile. But there were others, too, strangers who had begun appearing near her farm, asking questions about Zephyr. Their eyes lingered too long, their words too smooth. Callie grew wary, sensing that they were more interested in Zephyr than they let on. On the morning of the race, Callie packed her meager belongings and set out with Zephyr toward the competition grounds. The journey was long and fraught with tension. She could feel the weight of expectations, doubts, and hidden threats pressing down on her. But as she looked at Zephyr walking steadily beside her, she felt a spark of hope. They had come this far together, and they weren't going to give up now. The competition begins. The race grounds were a spectacle of chaos and color. Riders and their mounts from across the galaxy gathered in a sprawling arena, each one more impressive than the last. There were creatures with metallic scales that shimmered like diamonds, mounts with wings that spanned the length of a ship, and beasts so massive they shook the ground with every step. Callie's arrival did not go unnoticed. Whispers spread through the crowd as she led Zephyr to their designated spot. Many laughed, dismissing the pair as amateurs, but a few observed quietly, their expressions unreadable. Among them was a cloaked figure who seemed particularly interested, their gaze never leaving Zephyr. The race was set to begin with a series of trials, each more challenging than the last. As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, Callie tightened her grip on Zephyr's reins. "This is it," she said softly. "We've trained for this. Let's show them what we're made of." Zephyr let out a low, resonant snort, its eyes glowing faintly. Callie felt the bond between them strengthen, a silent promise passing between rider and mount. When the starting horn blared, Callie and Zephyr surged forward into the unknown, their hearts pounding as the first challenge began. The race of legends. The starting horn echoed across the vast arena, and the ground trembled as dozens of riders and their extraordinary mounts launched into motion. Callie gripped Zephyr's reins tightly as they surged forward, their first steps into the unknown chaos of the intergalactic frontier challenge. Around them, genetically enhanced beasts, sleek cybernetic creatures, and otherworldly mounts powered ahead, their riders shouting commands. At first, Callie and Zephyr lagged behind. The path twisted through a dense alien jungle, its towering luminous trees casting eerie shadows over the competitors. Vines and roots reached out like living traps, and the other mounts tore through them with ease. Zephyr, despite its growing strength, moved cautiously, navigating the obstacles with care. Callie could hear the sneers of nearby riders as they passed her. "Out of your league, human," one shouted, riding a metallic beast that leaped effortlessly over a fallen log. Callie clenched her jaw, but stayed focused. "We'll do this our way," she murmured to Zephyr. "Slow and steady for now." The first test, the Ravine of Blades. The course opened into a treacherous ravine, its rocky walls lined with sharp, jagged crystals that glinted menacingly in the sunlight. The riders ahead began to split into two groups, those who risked dashing straight through and those who tried to climb the narrow ledges above. Callie hesitated. Zephyr wasn't the fastest yet, but it was sure-footed. "We'll take the lower path," she decided. The air buzzed with tension as Zephyr picked its way through the ravine, its movements precise and deliberate. Around them, the sharp crystals slashed at riders and mounts alike. One competitor's mount, a massive lizard-like creature, slipped and tumbled, its rider barely escaping injury. But Zephyr seemed to anticipate the danger. Its glowing eyes scanned the terrain, avoiding loose rocks and shifting earth. Callie felt her confidence grow as they passed competitors who had underestimated the path's difficulty. Near the end of the ravine, a loud crash echoed behind them. Callie glanced back to see a massive, cybernetic mount bearing down on them, its mechanical claws smashing through the crystals. Its rider, clad in dark armor, smirked as he urged his beast closer. "Move, little girl, or I'll crush you, and that glowing freak of yours," he sneered. Callie's heart raced. She whispered to Zephyr, "Trust me. Let's show them what we can do." As the mechanical beast lunged, Zephyr's movements shifted. It didn't just dodge, it flowed, weaving through the crystals with an almost supernatural grace. The dark rider's mount stumbled, its bulk too unwieldy for the tight turns. Callie and Zephyr surged ahead, leaving the threat behind. The swamps of memory. The next section of the course led into a murky swamp, its surface shimmering with an iridescent film. This was the swamps of memory, a treacherous place known for its hallucinogenic mists. Riders whispered of competitors who had entered the swamp only to lose themselves in visions of the past. Callie hesitated at the edge. Zephyr stopped, pawing the ground as if sensing the danger. Around them, riders pushed forward, some covering their faces with masks to block the fumes. Callie had no such equipment, but she trusted Zephyr's instincts. "Lead the way," she said softly, loosening the reins. As they entered the swamp, the air grew thick and heavy. Strange shapes moved in the mist, and Callie's vision began to blur. She thought she saw her parents standing on the porch of their farmhouse, waving to her. For a moment, she almost turned back, desperate to reach them. But Zephyr let out a sharp, resonant whinny, snapping her out of the illusion. Callie blinked, realizing the truth. The swamp was playing tricks on her mind, trying to draw her into its trap. "Thank you," she whispered, patting Zephyr's neck. The horse's glowing eyes stayed focused, guiding them through the swamp with steady determination. Around them, other riders faltered, some turning back and others collapsing into the mist. By the time they emerged from the swamp, Callie realized they had overtaken a third of the competitors. The open plains and an unseen threat. The course opened into a vast plain, the final stretch before the climactic finish. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the ground shimmered with heat. Callie and Zephyr moved steadily, pacing themselves while other riders pushed their mounts to exhaustion. As they galloped across the plain, Callie noticed something strange. A shadow passed over them, but when she looked up, the sky was clear. Then she heard the hum, a low, menacing vibration that seemed to come from nowhere. Suddenly, A drone swooped down from the sky, its metallic body gleaming in the sunlight. It wasn't part of the race. Callie recognized it instantly. It was one of the syndicate's hunters, sent to capture Zephyr. "We're not stopping now," she hissed, urging Zephyr forward. The drone fired a net, its cords glowing with electric pulses. Zephyr dodged at the last second, the net missing by inches. Callie held on tightly as the horse picked up speed, its glowing markings pulsing brighter with every stride. The drone pursued them relentlessly, but Zephyr's agility was unmatched. It leaped over boulders, weaved through cracks in the earth, and finally outpaced the mechanical predator. Callie's heart pounded as the drone disappeared into the distance, its failure a testament to Zephyr's strength. The final surge. As the finish line came into view, Callie saw the leading group of competitors, a mix of elite riders and their imposing mounts. She felt the weight of the challenge ahead, but refused to back down. "Let's show them what you're made of," she whispered. Zephyr let out a fierce, echoing cry, its glowing markings blazing brighter than ever. With a burst of energy, they surged forward, leaving the doubts and dangers behind. The race wasn't over yet, but for the first time, Callie felt the thrill of possibility. Victory wasn't just a dream, it was within reach. A fight for survival. The final stretch of the Intergalactic Frontier Challenge was within sight, but for Callie and Zephyr, the true battle was only beginning. The open plains had given way to a perilous canyon, its jagged cliffs and narrow trails carved by ancient rivers. The finish line was on the other side, but getting there would mean navigating one of the most dangerous sections of the course. As Callie urged Zephyr forward, she noticed the remaining competitors around her. The elite riders had regrouped, their mounts bristling with tension. These were no ordinary racers. They were veterans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Among them was a cloaked figure riding a massive armored reptilian beast. The figure's face was obscured, but their eyes, gleaming with a cold determination, were locked on Callie and Zephyr. "Stay focused," Callie murmured to Zephyr, her hands tightening on the reins. She could feel the energy radiating from her companion, a quiet but unshakable resolve. The ambush. The racers plunged into the canyon, their mounts kicking up clouds of dust and loose rocks. Zephyr navigated the treacherous terrain with precision, its glowing markings flickering as it calculated every step. Callie's heart raced as they edged closer to the leaders, but her focus was broken by a sudden, piercing sound. From the cliffs above, a series of drones descended like metal vultures. These weren't race officials. They were syndicate hunters, their sleek designs unmistakable. The syndicate had grown tired of waiting. They didn't care about the race. They wanted Zephyr, and they were willing to take it by force. The first drone fired a barrage of electrified nets, aiming to entangle Zephyr. Callie barely had time to react before Zephyr leaped sideways, avoiding the trap with a grace that seemed almost impossible. The net struck the ground, sending up a burst of sparks. "What the hell is this?" shouted one of the other riders, whose mount narrowly avoided a drone's attack. "It's her," another rider snarled, pointing at Callie. "They're after that glowing freak of hers." The syndicate's attack threw the race into chaos. Riders scattered, some abandoning the course entirely to escape the assault. The cloaked figure, however, didn't flinch. Instead, they turned their beast toward Callie, their eyes narrowing with purpose. The pursuit. Zephyr pushed forward, its glowing eyes scanning the canyon for an escape route. Callie could feel the tension in its movements, the way it seemed to anticipate danger before it arrived. Behind them, the drones closed in, their mechanical hum growing louder with each second. The cloaked figure gave chase, their beast charging with thunderous steps. It was faster than anything Callie had encountered so far, its armored scales deflecting the loose rocks and debris that fell from the canyon walls. "You can't outrun them forever," the figure called out, their voice cold and unyielding. "Give up the horse, and I might let you walk away." Callie didn't answer. Instead, she leaned closer to Zephyr's neck and whispered, Trust me. We got this. Zephyr seemed to understand. Its glowing markings pulsed brighter, and suddenly it veered off the main path, leaping onto a narrow ledge that hugged the canyon wall. The move was risky. One misstep could send them plummeting into the abyss below, but it gave them a momentary advantage. The drones hesitated, their programming struggling to calculate the new trajectory. Unleashing Zephyr's power. As they raced along the ledge, Callie felt a strange energy building within Zephyr. The horse's glowing markings began to shimmer with a fiery intensity, and its movements grew faster, more fluid. It was as if the ancient power of the Vera was awakening fully for the first time. The canyon walls opened into a wider expanse, but the syndicate wasn't far behind. The drones had recalibrated, and the cloaked figure's beast was closing in, its claws digging into the rocky terrain with terrifying force. Then, without warning, Zephyr reared up and let out a powerful, resonant cry. The sound echoed through the canyon, a wave of energy rippling outward. The nearest drones faltered, their circuits sparking as they plummeted to the ground. The cloaked figure's mount stumbled, its balance disrupted by the shockwave. Callie stared in awe as the realization dawned on her. Zephyr wasn't just a survivor, it was a force of nature, a being capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The syndicate's final move. Despite the setback, the cloaked figure refused to relent. They urged their beast forward, pulling out a sleek, advanced weapon, a net launcher designed specifically for capturing alien creatures. Callie's stomach twisted as she saw the glowing lines of the net, its energy crackling ominously. "You can't win this," the figure growled, aiming the weapon at Zephyr. But Callie wasn't about to give up. She pulled the reins sharply, steering Zephyr into a narrow crevice. The move forced the figure to slow down, their larger mount struggling to fit through the tight space. It was a gamble, but it gave Callie and Zephyr a crucial lead. The finish line was close now, the cheers of the crowd faint but growing louder. Callie knew that once they reached the open plains, they'd have a chance to outrun their pursuers. But the path ahead was still fraught with danger, and the syndicate wasn't done yet. The final push. As they burst out of the crevice and onto the final stretch of the canyon, Callie spotted the finish line in the distance. Her heart pounded as she urged Zephyr to give everything it had. Behind them, the cloaked figure emerged, their weapons still trained on the horse. In a desperate move, the figure fired the net. Time seemed to slow as the glowing trap hurtled toward them. But Zephyr, with its instincts honed to perfection, twisted its body mid-stride, narrowly avoiding the net. The energy from the trap exploded harmlessly against the ground, sending up a plume of dust. With one final powerful leap, Zephyr surged ahead, crossing the canyon's edge and landing on the open plain. The finish line was just a few hundred meters away, and the syndicate's forces had been left behind. Callie didn't look back. She focused on the goal ahead, her bond with Zephyr carrying them forward. The crowd erupted into cheers as they approached, their journey far from over, but their victory within reach. Victory and redemption. The finish line loomed ahead, a gleaming beacon surrounded by a roaring crowd. The air buzzed with energy, the collective anticipation of thousands of spectators reaching its peak. Callie leaned closer to Zephyr, her fingers gripping the reins as if their bond alone would carry them across the threshold. Every muscle in Zephyr's body moved with precision, the glowing markings along its neck and flanks pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm. Together, they were unstoppable. Behind them, chaos still reigned. The syndicate's hunters had been left scrambling in the canyon, their drones disabled and their plans thwarted. The cloaked figure, whose mount had faltered at the last obstacle, was nowhere in sight. Yet Callie felt no relief. Her focus remained on the race. This was their moment, their final chance to prove to the galaxy that they were more than an underdog team. They were legends in the making. The final stretch. As Callie and Zephyr approached the last 100 meters, the remaining racers surged forward, their mounts pushing for a desperate last-minute sprint. Among them were genetically engineered predators with razor-sharp claws, sleek biomechanical beasts enhanced with propulsion systems, and riders who had spent their lives training for this race. A rider on a towering, four-legged creature covered in reflective scales drew close to Callie's side. He sneered, his eyes narrowing as he steered his beast toward Zephyr. His mount's powerful legs slammed into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust that obscured Callie's vision. "Out of the way, farm girl," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've come far enough." Callie didn't falter. "Zephyr, trust me," she whispered. "We've faced worse." Zephyr didn't slow. Instead, it leaped to the side, skinning the edge of the track where loose gravel made the footing treacherous. The crowd gasped, expecting them to fall. But Zephyr's alien heritage shone through. It moved with supernatural balance, its glowing hooves seemingly defying gravity. They gained ground, leaving the scaled beast and its arrogant rider behind. A stunning finish. With just 50 meters to go, Callie realized that two racers remained ahead of her. One was a veteran rider on a cybernetic wolf, its mechanical limbs pumping with inhuman speed. The other was a towering alien on a six-legged feline predator that glided across the ground like liquid shadow. Callie's heart pounded. She could feel Zephyr's energy surging beneath her, its every step a testament to the unbreakable bond they had forged. The glowing markings along its body began to shine brighter than ever, illuminating the track around them. "Just a little more," Callie urged. "We can do this." As if in response, Zephyr let out a fierce, echoing cry. The sound reverberated across the arena, silencing the crowd for a moment as all eyes turned to the glowing horse. With a burst of speed that defied logic, Zephyr surged forward, closing the gap between them and the leaders. The cybernetic wolf attempted to block their path, its rider shouting commands. But Zephyr veered sharply, its movements so fluid that it seemed to flow around the obstacle. The feline predator tried to match their pace, but its rider's hesitation gave Callie the opening she needed. Zephyr leaped forward, its glowing hooves striking the ground with thunderous force. The crowd erupted into cheers as Callie and Zephyr crossed the finish line, their victory undeniable. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, declaring them the winners of the Intergalactic Frontier Challenge. The aftermath. Callie dismounted, her legs trembling as she tried to process what had just happened. Zephyr stood beside her, its coat shimmering with a faint glow that hadn't faded since the final stretch. The crowd swarmed the track, reporters and fans clamoring to get a closer look at the mysterious horse and its young rider. But before Callie could celebrate, a stern-looking race official approached her. Behind him, a group of armed guards stood at attention. The crowd fell silent, their excitement replaced with confusion. "Callie Morgan," the official said, his voice cold. "You're coming with us." Callie's stomach dropped. She had expected trouble, but not so soon. "What's this about?" she demanded, stepping protectively in front of Zephyr. "You know exactly what it's about," the official replied. "That creature isn't just any horse. It's an unregistered Vera, a species under galactic protection. We've received reports from credible sources about its presence here." Callie's fists clenched. She glanced at the guards, then at the crowd, who were now murmuring among themselves. "Zephyr isn't just some creature," she said firmly. "He's my partner. We won this race fair and square." Before the official could respond, a loud voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "Let her speak." The voice belonged to an older man, his robes adorned with the insignia of the Galactic Historical Society. He pushed his way to the front, his eyes fixed on Zephyr. "This horse is no ordinary animal," he said, addressing the crowd. "It's the last of its kind, a living relic of an ancient civilization. And this young woman has done what no one else could. She's brought its legacy back to life." The official hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the man's authority. The crowd began to cheer again, their support for Callie and Zephyr growing louder. It was clear that the people saw them not as rule breakers, but as heroes. A new beginning. In the days that followed, Callie and Zephyr's stories spread across the galaxy. They were hailed as champions, not just for winning the race, but for the bond they had forged and the courage they had shown. The prize money was enough to save Callie's farm, but it was the respect and admiration of the galaxy that truly changed her life. As for Zephyr, its status as the last Vera brought both challenges and opportunities. Scholars and historians sought to study it, while others tried to claim it for themselves. But Callie stood firm, refusing to let anyone take away the companion who had given her hope. Together, they embarked on a new journey, not just as a rider and her mount, but as symbols of resilience, trust, and the unshakable belief that even the forgotten and overlooked can rise to greatness.